الله بالخير. ماذا لو كان كل ما يعتقد به عن الحرية والديمقراطية والثورة وهما مصنعا بعناية؟ تحت سطح الاحتجاجات الملونة والانتفاضات البطولية تكمن آلية عالمية خفية للسيطرة على العقول تدبرها نخب قوية لتقسيم الجماهير والتلاعب بها واستعبادها. أهلا بكم في الواقع القاسي للثورات الملونة والذي يميط اللثام عن عمليات سرية مصممة بدقة لتمزيق المجتمعات وقمع الوحدة والمقاومة وتجديد قبضة 1% على 99%. هل انتفاضات اليوم العفوية هي حقا ثورات شعبية أم هي مسرحيات مدبرة بمهارة تديرها مصالح أجنبية؟ في نيبال مثلا تكشف الأحداث الأخيرة عن انقلاب رقمي متخف في زي ديمقراطية مسخر بذكاء لإعادة تشكيل مصير أمة وترجيح كفة ميزان القوى في آسيا. هل اضطرابات نيبال ثورة ملونة مدعومة من الغرب؟ ما هي شبكة التحكم العالمية في العقول؟ وما هي الآلية وراء الثورات الملونة؟ ماذا تعني السيادة عندما يكون كل احتجاج معرضا للتلاعب؟ عندما تصبح كل منظمة غير حكومية سلاحا؟ وهل يمكن لبعض الدول مثل نيبال وغيرها أن يحافظ على استقلاله الحقيقي في هذا العالم الجديد المضطرب؟ أم هي مجرد ساحات معارك للإمبراطوريات المتنافسة؟ نرحب بكم ونرى ونسمع أكثر مع أنجلو جوليانو المحلل الجيوسياسي والمالي في البعد الأقرب. هذه الميادين، وأنا زينب صفار، خليكم ويانا. Angelo Giuliano, geopolitical and financial analyst. Salama, welcome to Al Mayadeen. This is the Proximate aspect. Pure pleasure to have you, Angelo.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Color revolutions were often tools for projecting US or Western power, and there are still these tools. If this is so, how and what's the global web of mind control? Let's unveil the machinery behind color revolutions, Angelo, please.
Well, we need to go back to some historical context. How did they start? Originally, those regime change we had around the world, they were done overtly. So it was all open. It was used by, organized by the CIA. And then at some point, they realized that this was getting unpopular because this was against democracy. You're toppling government for your own agenda. So they positioned themselves as through NGOs. And one of those organizations is called National Endowment for Democracy. Mm-hmm. And the one that started this organization said clearly what National Endowment for Democracy is doing is we're doing this covertly, openly, while the CIA was doing this covertly. So basically, now their face is through NGOs, and there's massive funding. And if we go into when did they start, it's a little bit difficult, but they started after World War II already. Mm-hmm. One of the examples is in France, de Gaulle, 1968. They toppled de Gaulle, and who was behind that was the CIA. And now you see many figures that hijacked movements that were legitimate back then, because people start going to the streets for legitimate reasons at first, and then those movements are hijacked and then the political message changes and it goes towards a US political agenda.
Now, today, what does sovereignty mean when every protest risks manipulation, Angela, and every NGO can become a weapon? And how can states tell the difference between a genuine people's movement, a movement for legitimate rights and demands, and a foreign crafted operation?
Well, first of all, this concept of sovereignty should be taught at school. People need to learn what sovereignty means, even before democracy, because democracy is a process of self-determination. If you do not have sovereignty, you cannot have democracy. It is as simple as that. So basically, sovereignty comes in different forms. The first form that everybody knows is the physical form. But then you have other dimensions. You have the financial forms. So let's say the IMF and the World Bank hijack your economy, then you don't have financial sovereignty. You have information space, and this is the modern warfare. This is the hybrid warfare is going through information space. I'm talking about social media, and I'm talking about mainstream media. And this is why countries need to preserve their sovereignty by having very strong national security law, including in the information space.
You often describe sovereignty as the backbone of multipolarity, Angelo. Do you see color revolutions as a direct assault on that sovereignty? And how are countries like Russia, China, or Iran learning to shield themselves from such interference?
What they've been learning, they are not perfect. I would say probably one of the countries that has the most, that is the most sovereign state is probably China, just because its economy is self-sufficient. It doesn't depend on foreign investment like IMF, World Bank. It has its own firewall. It is self-sufficient as well. It covers also the aspect of self-sufficiency. And then you have countries like Russia that actually took necessary steps to protect their sovereignty, especially since you had inorganic protests, especially figures like Navalny. Navalny was funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, so basically a de facto CIA agent. Now you have new laws that give the obligation to those people getting a certain level of foreign funding to declare themselves as being foreign agents.
Right. Now, let's talk Nepal in this sense. Is Nepal's unrest a Western-backed color revolution? You know, recent political turmoil there raised serious questions about outside influence. I know that you have insider information in this regard. So do you sense a familiar pattern? What's the proximate aspect here?
Well, it's not only insider information. I would say this is a black and colored revolution. You can, how do you analyze if it is a color revolution or not? It's very simple. You follow the money. You look at the figures. You look at the messages too. So how the protest start? Usually, most of the time, it starts with legitimate protest. In this case, in case of Nepal, they started with corruption. And of course, you have elites that are corrupt, but this is all around the world. And then gradually those protests are hijacked. And then you start following the figures that are on the front of the protests.
But Angelo, they banned the social media networks.
Oh, no, it was not a ban. It was a matter of protection. You see, they had, those social media had to comply with Nepal laws, like anywhere. You know, Google has to comply to US law. Google has to comply to EU law. But then coming to Nepal, they didn't want to comply with Nepali laws.
So let's dig deeper into what happened in Nepal, please.
So basically what you see, what you need to look at is those people on the front leading those protests and their funding. Now the funding is very clear. There's USAID, there's National Endowment for Democracy, absolutely all of them, including Soros. And what they did, they elected, basically they created chaos. It was pure anarchy. They burned the parliament, they beat politicians, And they toppled the government. And probably there was at some point some support from the army, or I would call it tacit support from the army. So what they did was a sham elections of what they called an interim government. It was done on a platform, a Discord platform, where they voted, only 4,000 people voted on that platform for a population of 30 million people. And that platform was managed by people that were funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, which is de facto the CIA. So can you imagine, this is a sham elections where you have 4,000 people on a platform run by the CIA voting for a population of 30 million people. So it was a sham election. And then I would say what is blatant, there's a prime minister that elected a cabinet, and you have 3/4 of the people that are the ministers that have been on the payroll of the CIA, on the CIA payroll, CIA outlets like NED, USAID. They've been on the payroll for decades.
Now, given Nepal's position between India and China, could this unrest be a new chapter in the larger regional power struggle, Angelo?
I would say Nepal is a landlocked country, and it is between China and India. It's extremely poor. It's not self-sufficient. It depends. Its economy depends on both China and India. So Nepal cannot cut ties neither with China, neither with India. But what can happen is that you have some projects that are related to the Belt and Road Initiative that are critical, especially for a country like Nepal, which is landlocked. It needs to have road connection, train between India and China, and to basically have them to have access to trade that are beyond Nepal. So I would say that lots of projects would be stalled. It is, you see, in this case, it's not about having Nepal becoming completely anti-China. It is about you create chaos and you contain a country that could prosper at the border of China. And I would say there's another risk. There's a few years ago, you had the army that was actually trying to have a deal with the USA to have military presence in Nepal. It was called the SPP. This SPP was under humanitarian reasons. We might have some, army personnel, US army personnel on the ground in Nepal, but it starts like this. But the risk is that they could have this SPP agreement reactivated and have long-term US military presence in Nepal. And we need to keep in mind that for China, this is extremely bad because it has historical precedent. In the 1950s and the 1960s, you had the CIA that was running training camp for Tibetan separatists in Nepal. So you can imagine in the psychology for China to have again military personnel in Nepal it looks extremely bad.
All right. Angelo, in talking about China, China seems to be playing a quieter game, less about protests, more about partnerships. Is Beijing's model of influence in Nepal more about economic ties and elite consensus than political agitation, perhaps? And is that proving more sustainable, in your opinion?
Well, in the case of China, it is very important, and this is probably one of the aspects of this multipolar world. It is not about ideology, it is not about antagonizing, it is about engaging to gain leverage. So when it comes to Nepal, China is not going to criticize the Nepali regime, even if it becomes anti-Chinese. The same as we saw Syria, China accepting the new Syrian regime, and China also is engaging with Israel. Why it is so? It is actually the strategy of you gain leverage to engagement rather than so using the carrot as opposed to the stick. But it doesn't. China is not going to criticize when it comes to legality of what happened on the ground. But the reaction of China when it came to Nepal was to welcome the new government and hoping for the best. And that's probably the wisest way, rather than just going and antagonize and playing in the hand of what the US would want China to react. If China had a bad reaction, then they could use maybe an anti-Chinese movement saying, well, China is against us, it's against our movement. No, and it is this philosophy of saying, be close to your friends, but be even closer to your enemies.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. Now, in turning to Gaza, after 2 years of genocide, an agreement to a ceasefire was reached. Maybe the conventional narrative of the war focuses on immediate human casualties and physical destruction. However, the situation in Gaza reveals a more profound and lasting tragedy, the systematic dismantling of an ecosystem. Might you tell us more about the Israeli environmental warfare as strategy in Gaza, Angelo?
Well, this is a very extremely important point. What's happening in Gaza, it's what we call eco-genocide. Even if war was to stop tomorrow, which I have great doubts, because there's a final solutions that the Israel is seeking for, but let's say war would stop tomorrow. Well, there's so much destruction in terms of ecology. The land is so toxic that it would take 30 years for Gaza to become the way it was before. So you cannot plant vegetables. You have the sewage for 2 million people that has been thrown in the sea. So that means the fishing, it is impossible to fish, and it is going to be like this for years and decades to come. And people are going to live in a toxic environment. Bombing has lots of remains that are extremely toxic. So this is going to become unlivable. And people that are going to stay there for the years to come are going to be sick. They are going to have cancer. But this is part of the warfare of the Zionist regime. They need to destroy not only the ecology, but the whole history. There won't be any remains of what Gaza was. And Gaza has hundreds and hundreds of years of history.
Right, and this is also, of course, part of the genocide perpetrated against Gaza and the people of Palestine. Now, Iran has faced unilateral coercive measures, sabotage, and multiple regime change attempts. A recent Israeli sneak attack, of course, yet it stands, it's resilient. From what you've seen and learned on the ground, Angelo, what makes Iran's model of sovereign defense unique, and how much of that strength comes from its ties with other multipolar actors like Russia and China?
Well, there's definitely, I think Iran suffered a lot for the sanctions, but there was early on in the early days, a lot of, especially when it came to medical supplies, you have a lot of people that died because of the sanctions. But I would say over time, those sanctions have become blessing in disguise. In a sense, there's same as Russia. You had the sanctions, the country puts itself into a mode of finding the solutions and becoming more self-sufficient. And then you start to have new industries that are being created that needs to replace all those Western companies that left. That means that you need to have ingenuity. You need to build up engineering, and slowly, you become self-sufficient, because this is a matter of national security. And when it comes to BRICS, what the good thing now with BRICS is that they are bypassing sanctions. They are finding solutions. Now they have payment systems that they don't need to use the US dollar. So you see, in reality, now Iran is in a much stronger position than it was before, but it had to go through some bumps. But imagine it doesn't depend anymore on external influence.
Right. In referring to the strength of the Islamic Republic of Iran, do you speculate that there's going to be another sneak attack by Israel against Iran?
Oh, absolutely. Well, imagine Israel, the DNA of Israel is, it is war. If there was to be real peace in the whole region, including with Iran, Israel would cease to exist. We need to go back to history. Israel was created by the British Empire because they needed a foreign entity to divide the Arab and Muslim world. Two parts. There was a Maghreb and the Levant. Because there was so many resources, there was a unified language and also unified culture and religion that was extremely dangerous for the US British Empire. Israel was fulfilling that function, but Israel is still fulfilling that function. Now, when you look at the nature of Israel, this is ethnocentric apartheid state. If it was at peace with its neighbor, this whole idea of ethnocentric apartheid state would just look, excuse my language, but you're stupid. They can justify something which is absolutely immoral somehow, but that's justification because they use the Holocaust card, and in addition,
but they committed the Holocaust against Gaza.
Yeah. But in addition to that, they are actually portraying themselves as being the eternal victim and being in danger of being attacked. So you see, they hijacked many of those countries around them. I'm talking about especially the Gulf states. So basically, they're not at war with them, and all of them, they're complying somehow. You see, they all with the US. Now you have Iran, but Iran is not attacking Israel, but Israel need to portray Iran as the enemy because that's part of the DNA of Israel.
Sure. Now, Emmanuel Todd, French intellectual, just said European leaders obsessed with regime change in Russia and Iran will very likely end up being replaced themselves very soon. The governments in Russia and Iran and the economies of these countries will only strengthen and gain more new momentum. Does that signal the downfall of Europe's liberal elites and the rise of the forces of the people?
Well, absolutely. Well, when it comes to Europe, there's another debate. It is about the sovereignty of a European nation state. And we need to go back to history. The EU itself was a CIA project, and I'm going back to the founder of the EU. There was Jean Monnet and Walter Hallstein. Walter Hallstein was an ex-Nazi that became the first president of the EU. The name back then was the SECA. It was around, a trade agreement with steel and coal. But the initiative itself was by the CIA, and why the CIA was pushing for this unification was to control those nation states and ultimately destroy the notion of nation state. So you see, the borders there's no more borders. There's one currency, and all the leaders, EU leaders, are pre-selected by Bilderberg and by the US elites. So in reality, we do not have sovereignty in Europe, absolutely no sovereignty.
Right, Angelo Giuliano, geopolitical and financial analyst. Thank you very much for sharing your views. Lovely talking to you, Angelo.
Pleasure.
Thank you. يقود الغرب الآن عقيدة أكثر قسوة وصرامة، نهج يفضل القوة الغاشمة على الحوار واحترام سيادة الدول، ويعتمد الإكراه والإخضاع بدل الإقناع. لقد خلع الشمال العالمي قناعه. ما تبقى هو سياسات الهيمنة المطلقة العنان، حروب خارجة عن القانون، وصدمات استراتيجية ومبادئ أخلاقية تنسف في سبيل السيطرة. من أنقاض غزة وحطامها وحرب الإبادة إلى مفاعلات إيران النووية التي قصفت، ومن صمت أوروبا إلى وزارة الحرب الجديدة في واشنطن، كل ذلك يمحو الحدود الفاصلة بين الدفاع عن النفس والهيمنة على الآخرين. لم يعد الأمر يتعلق بمن يضع القواعد، بل بمن يجرؤ على العيش من دونها. في الخلاصة، إذا كان الغرب نفسه لم يعد يحترم قواعده بل تخلى عنها بالكامل، فمن سيحدد النظام العالمي الجديد ومن سيتولى قيادته؟ من كل الميادين، حياكم.